when we meet with Sogeti, the main task is to get even more confused with each other. And I thought that when we discuss the pattern that we could follow today, the best way was not to give away who is the killer. And one of those crime stories when you need to wait until the end to know, but who is the Utopia kind of guy who makes all this mess? So we decided, well, maybe we'll leave that at the very end so people will be increasingly confused. And as I tell my students, the best way of learning is to feel the pain of not knowing who the killer is. So waiting until the end, but surely at some point something will make sense. This is the time to start looking at your emails because the confusion will not be resolved. But hopefully something out of that confusion will emerge in terms of lines of investigation and a couple of ideas that we hope to put together. Now, during the 20 plus minutes that we have together, I will make implicit references to things that you have heard today and yesterday. If by any chance I step on some toes, that is not inadvertently. I mean to step on those toes. I will not just refer to those toes by name and surname. Now, in terms of the topic for us is really quite general. Like, can we really have a utopian thinking in this digital age? Or do we have to go back to the usual classics? Now, it is important why the utopian thinking has to be with us, and that's the topic for us. Now, this will come back, so if we get lost, I do, as a philosopher, enjoy confusion, but up to a certain point. It's like chocolate, too much of it. At some point, it becomes kind of hurtful. So when confusion will be excessive, the map will show up again. I'll tell you a little bit about Utopia 101, just for beginners, so that we start getting a sense of all the threads and lines of reasoning that we have followed so far. Then, is a digital kind of utopia really possible today? Is that something that we want to discuss? Mind, I'm not saying possible as in realistic, because it's called utopia for a reason. But like the thinking, like, can we have that kind of outrageously unrealistic way of looking at the world? And well, there are 3 problems and 3 solutions that I'd like to share with you in this wild thinking. And finally, a conclusion to see where we are. And then maybe, just maybe, a question, always the difficult question from Mikhail. So Utopia 101. Well, first of all, one has to understand, that's what we've been discussing for the past 24 hours or so, that utopia is about perfection. Now, I hear people, trust me, even back in Oxford, saying, oh, we need to make this more perfect. If it is perfect, it's like people, oh, this is more than 100%. Like, go back to school. Oh, this is totally full, but we need to feel it a little bit more. Like, it's full, it's 100%, it's perfect, it's utopia. You don't move. That's it. That's the end of the journey. So all you can do with utopia is to stay on utopia, but you don't move forward. And it's a social reality. There is no utopia when you're just alone, the last man on earth, still listening to a robot giving you some advice about what glasses you should be wearing. Meanwhile, you are the only one left. No. Nuclear weapons, whatever, you're the only one standing on this rubbish of a planet, destroyed, and the robot tells you, these are the shades that you should really enjoy, and by all means, make that an engagement and a profound, oh, and by the way, if you really have spare time, there's a video game for you. Now, that is not the reality. Utopia is a social thing. And utopia thinking is important. Not because we would like to waste time, in the ivory tower back in Oxford, we do, with a glass of sherry, by all means. But that's not the main purpose, normally. It's because if you think of something really, 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 really hard, then the closer you get there, the better. It's like putting the bar very high. The higher the bar, the better the jump. So utopian thinking has, especially in realities, like in government, in companies, has 2 functions. It's like having a beautiful project. One is to criticize what you have now. Like, look, this is where we should be. Can you imagine where we are now? That's utopian thinking. And the other one is to know exactly where you would like to be. So if you hear anyone talking about boats and tempers, well, that's Plato. And it's important to give to Plato what belongs to Plato. Plato, the Greek philosopher, just in case. I know we're in Paris, but you never know. A long time ago, gives you this beautiful picture. It says, look, the politician or the manager is like the skipper, the pilot of a boat. He needs to navigate currents and winds to go from here to there. And he has two fantastic skills. He knows where to go, and he knows how to navigate to get there. Sometimes the wind will take him left and right, but he will be back. He will go in the right direction. So that's the art of the kybernetes, that's the Greek word. And now fast forward a few millennia, couple, and all of a sudden someone talks about cybernetics using the same word. Why? Because it's automation, etc. The art of making things in a way that is no longer necessary not to involve a human being. So all that is in the back of this utopian thinking. You have a project, and you have a way of knowing where to go and how to criticize if you're not getting there quickly enough. I told you, it's perfection, is 100%, is the glass totally full, no drop can go in. So what kind of perfection? 3. Space, time, and people. So it's the perfect, absolutely perfect space. And it's paradise, Arcadia. Mind that this is something that we culturally, especially in Western cultures, have put in the past for a long time. For the Greeks, before Christianity, all that was in the past, and it was irrecoverable. It was something that we were constantly moving away from. So the longer the distance, the more rubbish the world was going. Basically, it was going downhill as we speak. Then Christianity happened, and he said, no, this is good news. This is definitely good news. We were there, this is rubbish, but we can go back there. And all of a sudden, history is no longer circular, it's linear. You start here, and you can go back where you started. But in the meanwhile, this paradise is not just what Adam and Eve left behind. It's also a golden age in the past. It's also a golden age that you can reach in the future. That's why utopian thinking is hugely influenced by Christian thinking. It's all about how can we regain something that we can regain, but we left behind. Now, in terms of time, inevitably, is a long, long time ago in a past, different galaxy, whatever, golden age. And the people are Adam and Eve, of course, or something like that. A perfection that we have lost. People who didn't age, people who didn't have any vice, people who didn't have any fragility, all in the past, or, remember, now that we have a Christian way of looking at things, or more theological, something we can regain. So perfect time, perfect space, perfect people, that's what utopian thinking starts looking like. Okay, what about time? I won't go back to dystopia, but I'd like you to think for a moment about the difference between the utopian thinking and this kind of scenario. Why do we care so much about dystopia if utopia, which is the counterpart, doesn't exist? So why should I worry about this when I don't, as it were, cheer so much about utopia? There's a misalignment here. Dystopia is about time. It's not about space. Remember, space, perfection, but dystopia is not in another galaxy, in another universe, someone has a really, really, really horrible, shitty life. No, it's us in the future. It's a projection in time. That's why we're worried. That's why any technological development normally brings up this kind of scenario. Say, oh my goodness, are we walking down that road? That's not a particularly nice road. So I won't go back to dystopia, but remember, when people compare, and the journalists tend to do that, there's not just utopia, there's also dystopia. Wait a moment. The utopia is about space, mostly, which I may or may never reach. The dystopia is part of my DNA, is where I could get if things don't quite work. So, back to us. If that is the ABC of our vocabulary, how we play the utopian game, the language that we use, can we do that today? Can we actually translate all that elements into something that would fit with the culture we heard today describe, with a teenager generation, whatever generation you want to attach to that particular teenager moment? In my own case, I prefer to be rather simple-minded, and I distinguish only between two kind of sort of human beings. There's the human beings, mostly in this room, who have seen a world that it was 100% analog, full stop. Some of us may even remember black and white TVs, for goodness sake, or a world without mobile phones. Basically, that world. And a generation, normally my students by now, in their 20s, who had never, ever seen a world that was not already digital. They have no idea about personal experience, the real thing, the thing you bump against of a world without Amazon, without the influencers, without Facebook, without Twitter, without mobile phones, etc., etc. So that divide, to me, is the real divide between whatever other generations you want to slice it. The slicing is like the salami. You can always slice it more thinly. But that block, the people who saw it and the people who didn't, well, that's really, to me, the people on one side and the other side of the bank or the river. How we make the transition between one side and the other, that is pretty much about the responsibility of the current generation in charge, the one which have seen the world analog, full stop. Now, for that generation and the one coming up, the one which hasn't, can they think in terms of utopia in a world that is no longer just entirely analog? No, the question here, therefore, is can we have a specifically digital utopia? I like to put thinkable because I'm aware of the friction conceptually between the utopia, which is not realizable, you cannot make it, and someone says, is utopia possible? Really? Did you understand what I said? It's perfection. No, it isn't. So we shouldn't waste our time. No, it's a regulative ideal. It's something you walk towards. So please, next time you hear anyone asking the question, is utopian thinking? Oh, let's think the unthinkable. Logic. Okay. The unthinkable is, by definition, unthinkable. And so on. So can you define, etc., etc. But it is possible to think something that is of that magnitude of perfection. Absolutely. In the same way as we can think a perfect X, Y, and Z. So it's something that we can do. Well, the technologies in question, they are kind of inviting us in that direction. Like when it comes to, remember, space, time, and people, well, they design space, remarkably, I'll tell you more and more concretely in a moment. They also transform our time into something that is increasingly dependent on technologies, meaning it's hyper-historical. It's not just historical. Historical means after the invention of the alphabet. That's what it means. Prehistory is before the invention of the alphabet. Some people out there in the Amazonian environment, they still live prehistorically. They have no way of recording the present for future consumption. They don't have an alphabet. We have been living in historical times for, 6,000 years or so? Well, because we are depending increasingly on technologies that register, communicate, and manipulate data, well, we are just becoming more and more historical. If you like hyperhistory or whatever label fits your conceptual framework. And they are enabling, empowering a lot. We've seen, today, yesterday, but in everyday life, the things that we can do with this stuff is amazing. Not that we're doing it, we still watch cats on Facebook anyway, but what we could do with this, it's extraordinary. And therefore, the digital technologies do invite us to think in terms of, maybe we can push the limit. Better time, better space, better people. And therefore, some utopian thinking. Now, let's analyze. Better space, thanks to the technologies. Now, for a long time, remember, utopian thinking has been about urban environments. The time of the Greece when it was all about green lands, it's gone. From Plato onwards, Augustine more, these are classics in utopian thinking, is always about a city. We get together and it works. It's the perfect city. Now, today, that perfect space, which is urban, is probably represented in this, to my best of my understanding, by Smart Cities brochure. That's the only place where I find some utopian thinking of the real kind. Pick up any brochure of a smart city and it describes an impeccable, perfect world. Now look at the picture here, and there are at least two very odd things. And it's just a standard picture, and I'm not particular criticism for this, whoever put it there. First of all, how lonely is that? Didn't we say it was a social thing? Well, a young guy with a dog? Well, because inevitably our society is very individualistic. You hear about fulfillment of me, my values. The customer individual has to be satisfied. How about larger thinking? We're not there yet. And look at is there any car from the 60s? I mean, surely you go back home and there are plenty of antiques that you're still using it. But utopian thinking of this kind is ahistorical. Everything is brand new, built yesterday. And most of the things are all identical because it's a single company producing everything right now. There is no history, there is no past. That's why Blade Runner is such a great piece of science fiction. It has that greasy, long-term, dirty nature that is typical of history. So smart cities, that's where we hear more about utopian thinking in a critical way. In terms of perfect time, well, you hear a lot about this, not in so many words. Eschatology, I'm not even sure everybody knows how to spell it, but it does mean the discourse about the future, the ultimate things. We have inherited from theology, which was inherited, grabbed by political thinking, and now we have it in technological discourse. Essentially, the technocrat, the techno-futurist will say, in 30 years, in 20 years, the future, if you don't do it now, see how, but if only. And this eschatological view is a typical techno-friendly perspective. Just a reminder, just in case, imagine if you live in the 1930s and someone had asked you to guess the world 30 years afterwards, 1960. 1930, 1960. Who in 1930 would have guessed another war? The whole opening up of markets, the end of the British Empire, the US, and we're 1960 now, and Vietnam is around the corner, Woodstock, Men on the Moon, etc. 1969, clearly is an exercise rather pointless. Be careful when people start telling you about the future. Unless they are magicians, normally they are selling you a product. And then perfect people. Well, this also is part of the technological discourse today. Humanity 2.0, transhumanism, people with funny ears, our lamp pending on here. This is not the future, and never been, will never be. Not because, then you're just making the same mistake, you're predicting, because we know human nature. We are not moving necessarily in that direction, but it's a good evidence of an earnest desire to improve ourselves, to make ourselves a little bit better, hear more, see more, walk better, and so on. So there is truth in this too. But then again, it's about utopian thinking. So all this comes with some problems and some solutions. And I need to be a little bit quicker now. So digital utopias, because you have the picture. The problem and solutions are, first of all, we don't have any other space but this planet. And this planet is not doing well at all. These are the real problems. Not whether you have another pair of shades or what lipstick, those hundreds of millions will buy or not buy. Sometimes in that context, I do suggest to take down the names of those people, because that is not exactly the humanity you would like to see going around. Hopefully they are so much worried about their lipstick as they are about global warming. So we don't have another space, but we do have a possibility here. The digital and the environment coming together, the green and the blue. And I know it's two colors, I'm sorry, Miko. But I'm sure that they make one single color. It's a very pale, nice shade of blue, turquoise. The green and the blue are of these two problem and solutions. Here, we just have, it's complicated, but we need to move from the past, which was a circular economy poor. We didn't throw anything away for millennia because there was nothing to throw away. We just could not spare anything until recently, to as we moved through technology to a linear, rich economy, when we started buying fridges and throw them away and buy a new one and another one and another one. To combine this into, thanks to technology again, the circularity of a green economy and the richness of a linear one. It can be done. It's a design issue. I'm not sure whether we will do it, but surely it's a possibility. Utopian thinking, maybe, but that's where we want to be. Second problem, utopia is against time. Remember perfection. Once you are there, all you can do is run in place. You don't go anywhere else because you reach the top of the scale. So how can we make utopian thinking friendly to time? Now here is the moment, I know it's before lunch, just so, well, almost there. So look at this particular curve here. It's called the Pareto frontier. For the economists here, it's very common. Imagine my wife and I, we have a little piece of garden, and I grow vegetables, she grows flowers, or vice versa, depending on your taste. If you are in A, that's the number of flowers and veggie we are growing, you're not using your garden well enough. But you have at least two optimal points, flower and veggie at the best. Now, A is certainly a mistake, but B and C are two alternative ways of using your garden at its best. They belong to that Pareto frontier. The beauty of this is that there are many points on that frontier. So perfection, in terms of flowers and veggie, has many, many ways of getting a trade-off. That's crucial, because otherwise you start thinking there's only one utopia. No, there are as many utopias in your garden, veggie and flowers, as there are points on the yellow line. So it can be friendly. So it's no longer improvable. That's the old utopia. There is no better time in the future, end of time, or it can be historical, it can be dynamic, it can be pro-time. You can move around that yellow line depending on needs and requirements. More flowers, more veggie, or you make your calculations within your company. So what I'm suggesting here is that instead of looking at the world like this, meaning there is a target, I'm going to get there, once I'm there, I stay there. Imagine that S is the symptotic society, the society that I want to reach. Now X there is where improvements are happening. So more and more and more improvements here through time. As you move forward, this is not the way history works. This, at its best, is how history works. A is an asymptotic society. It gets closer to where we would like to be and never reaches it. It's more dynamic, it's pro-time, time works for you, not the other way around. And utopia, well, becomes an asymptopia. Now, forgive me for the play with words, but something that you get closer and closer and closer as you move forward. So the solution here is utopizing, or thinking in a sort of utopian way, as upgrading. Not updating, but upgrading. Every step gets closer to, but never reaches the point where you are. It's a good way of thinking in terms of getting better and better. Now, the last problem, collective happiness. Remember that, the guy with the dog, that's not where we want to be. That's not just about the individual. It's about society as well as. So collective happiness is something that we covered before with Sogeti, and I recommend the report about happiness. But let me just make clear one point, just in case. Well, surely, no, individual happiness, a lot of individual happiness, societal happiness, no. A lot of the happiness that we have, as in fulfillment of our hopes, is social. And if you need a metaphor, it's just about kissing. You cannot kiss yourself. You can kiss someone else. You can be kissed. Kissing takes two. That's the same about social happiness. It's tango, etc. You can think of other things where two makes the happiness of the two bigger than the single happiness of the two staying together. So it's not always an aggregate. Now, because it's not, social happiness is more than the sum of individual happiness. It's a collective thing that on top of, together with, etc. Now, how do we move in that direction? How do we make sure that that happens? Well, technologies at the moment, or technologies of hope, are hijacking individual hope. They convince you that that particular phone with 3 cameras is so infinitely better than that phone with 2 cameras. And I'm sure that I just had to wait a few more months and there will be 4 cameras. And the 3 cameras, oh, it's so much yesterday, you must be joking. Now, surely there's more to hope than the hijacking of my hope is to own the 3-camera new gadget. As the collective happiness that I'm talking about. And we're almost there. Collective happiness is a mutual donation of sense and purpose. We heard a lot about meaning. Well, in the concrete sense, takes 2, or takes many. Now that is the sense in which we have the stronger taste of we, and anyone who has played any game together has a clear understanding of commonality of purposes. And I'm coming to an end because I know Michiel is looking at the time, and we have just about half a minute left. That's the conclusion. In a digital utopia, we have green and blue. So the environment and technology are the best marriage we can possibly have. That's the 21st century for us. That's our human project on this planet as we speak today. There is no other solution, and we better embrace it, joyfully. Incremental fulfillment of individual hopes. That's what happiness is. Put your hope lower, have a lot of them, incrementally fulfill them, and you will be happy. Have too many hopes, too big gap, or no hopes enough, happiness won't be around. But also collective donation of sense and meaning. Sense as a story, and meaning as every gentle act of meaning today, tomorrow. That starts looking like a utopia. Yeah, I know, that's exactly what we're talking about. No, I was totally unrealistic. Exactly. Yeah. Wasn't the bar not sufficiently high? That's where the bar should be. And in asymptopia, remember, we're not getting there, but we're getting closer and closer and closer. Digital technologies are designed to treat every person not as an individual only, but also as a member of a collective. So your next bank, your next agency would not just look at you, but also you and maybe your family, your friends, your colleagues, the whole company. That is a way of putting the two things on two legs, not the individualism only, but also the collective. And with that, thank you, Michiel.
Thank you. So let's stand here in this place.
This space.
Maybe you can explain to me what it actually means, but no, we will do that.
It's to generate confusion. Nobody knows.
This morning I asked a question from the audience about the are we confident that the next generation will do better? And 70% said actually yes. Now, if I listen to your story, it's all about trade-offs. And are you confident that we and the next generation will make the right trade-offs?
Okay, well, they cannot do much worse than we have. So basically, the bar that we put for the next generation is so low. I mean, 2 world wars, we destroyed the planet. How much worse can they do? I mean, so we dropped 2 bombs on 2 cities, 2 atomic bombs. Like, surely it's hard to do any worse. So I think they can definitely do much better. Are we giving them the right sort of support, the platform to do better? I'm not so sure.
Do we give them the wisdom to make the right trade-offs?
I think we can do a much better job in enabling them to do better. At the moment, we are squeezing every ounce of commercialization and consumerism out of the best tools we have, which is not a bad idea, right? Don't get me wrong, but surely that should be compared to something else. I mean, if that's all there is, there's 50 years of internet. I mean, when we were discussing this in the past, before the web, when internet was only internet, not the web, 1989, before that, well, for 20 years, we really thought that was going to be a great force for more democracy, more information, better educated, more sort of discourse and discussion. Commercialization has made that a little bit more difficult.
And are you an optimist? Or what are you?
Yeah, we had this discussion. So let me be clear. I'm an optimist about opportunities, and I'm frustrated about our abilities to grab these opportunities. It's like saying humanity, having built some amazing technologies and not being up to the technologies that we built. So it's more like saying, look, we created this amazing stuff and we are misusing it, underusing it. That's too bad. So I'm not a pessimist, but sometimes I'm really frustrated.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.